the Prophet ﷺ said, inform him that Allah loves him. Allah loves him for every human being can't get out of obedience to something. Is there anything negative about Islam? No. But sometimes there are things that are difficult for the soul. Our prayers are not a source of embarrassment for us. And this is really important, especially for our Muslim youth. I am not like those who disbelieve. I'm different. In this episode, inshallah, we want to look at Surah Ikhlas and Surah Kafiroon. These are two surahs of Tawheed. These are surahs that deal with two important factors related to the believers, which is our relationship with Allah and our relationship with others. And so in Surah Al-Fatiha, Allah highlights the importance of each of these by first mentioning His qualities in Surah Al-Fatiha. And then thereafter, He says for us to say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ. You alone do we worship, on you alone do we depend, guide us all on the straight path. So mentioning we, even if a person's praying by himself, indicates the importance of a person's relationship with others, and Surah Al-Kafiroon highlights that. And Surah Al-Ikhlas highlights knowing who Allah is, because knowing who Allah is going to impact our relationship with Him. In Surah Al-Kafiroon, Allah begins the surah by saying, after A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun. So saying Ya, that they call a harf nida. That's a particle that's used to call out to someone who's far away, right? Shows that there's some distance. There should be some distance between the believer and the disbeliever, because of the impact that those relationships interacting with the disbeliever can have. And the Muslim, and when we talk about interacting with those who disbelieve, it's important that our relationships be regulated in certain ways, and that we understand what's meant by being absolved of those who disbelieve. Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't have a closeness or attachment to the disbelievers. Does it mean that I'm mean to them, that I'm harsh with them, that I'm cold with them? No, because the point is ultimately calling them to Islam. But what it means is, number one, that I'm not going to disobey them. I'm not going to obey them in opposition to Islam. That's number one. That I'm not going to leave Islam in order to follow them. Number two, that I'm not going to support them in their disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they're doing something that goes against Islam, then I'm not going to be around them and support them when they're doing that. And number three, and this is really important, especially for our Muslim youth, that we don't feel inferior to them. Like, we recognize that we're on the truth. We recognize that we're Ashabul Jannah, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, that we are the people that Allah has chosen for Jannah. That our prayers are not a source of embarrassment for us, but they're a source of honor and pride for us, because we are outwardly worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a day and time when people are not afraid to dress up in clothing of the opposite sex, and to actually say, my background is English teaching, so this pronoun issue is horrible. My pronouns are she, they, and we. What are you talking about? You're one person. How are your pronouns they? How does that work that I refer to one person as they, unless you're like a king or an authority, right? So people are not shy about this. And so if people are not shy about foolishness and backwardness, why should I be shy to worship Allah? Why should I not be proud to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so we don't disobey, that we obey Allah, and we don't disobey Allah trying to please those who disbelieve. This is a part of our disconnection and our dissociation from them, that we don't support them in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we don't feel inferior to them. That this is the basic that a person needs in order to preserve his deen. As Allah mentions in Surah Al-Hujurat, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانِ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. That Allah endeared, that He made you love Iman, that you have to love being a Muslim. وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ, and he made you prefer it even though there's difficulties attached to it. Because tazyin is to focus on the good and to remove to not focus so much on the negative qualities. Is there anything negative about Islam? No. But sometimes there are things that are difficult for the soul. And so focusing for those things that are good and the good outcomes that come with Islam and overlooking the difficulties that are attached to it is a part of maintaining the deen. Huffatil Jannah bil makari. Jannah is surrounded by things that are difficult and hated to the soul. And it's a strive and a struggle to get over it. And so why is there this separation between the believers and the disbelievers? Number one, because we have a different authority base. La a'budu ma ta'budun. I don't worship what you worship. So your reference point for what you do is whatever. But my reference point is Allah. And so because we have two different reference points, how are we ever going to come together? And the source of authority for us is different. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدتُّمْ. There are different tafsir as it relates to these ayats. Some of them mention that, and it's an emphasis of us not worshiping the same thing. And some mention that it's an indication of the difference in the way that we worship. So even how we do what we do is different. It's different in terms of intent. Why am I doing what I'm doing, right? Some disbelievers, not all of them, some of them give charity so they can get a tax write-off. That's not charitable. That's stingy, because you're only doing it because you get something out of it, right? And so why we do what we do is different. And the way that we do it, and we do what we do following the way of the Prophet ﷺ, because that's pleasing to Allah. And that we strive to be consistent in it, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that the most beloved actions to Allah are those that are consistent, even if they're few. It can be consistent for the Muslim. Why? Because we're doing it for Allah. If you're doing it for yourself, if you're doing it for the praise of the people, then when people are there to praise you, you'll do it. And when people are not there to praise you, then you won't do it, right? But if you're doing it for Allah, Allah is always watching us. And so we always have a reason to do what we do. And lakum dinukum waliya deen. Deen is what someone humbles himself to, or what someone submits himself to, what someone obeys. And so every human being can't get out of obedience to something and humbling himself to something, whether it's his own mind and intelligence, whether it's his wealth, whether it's his power, money, family, whatever. There's something that someone is willing to humble himself for, submit himself for, dedicate himself to. As for the believer, we dedicate ourselves to Allah. For those who disbelieve, they dedicate themselves to anyone and anything else. And so that's why the surah ends, lakum dinukum waliya deen. You have what you submit yourself to, and I have what I submit myself to. And as long as it's not Allah, it's not going to be the same. So this is Surah Al-Kafiroon. And from the importance of Surah Al-Kafiroon is that it's recited in the first thing in the morning, and it's recited the last thing in the evening. When a person gets up for Fajr, right? He prays the two sunnahs of Fajr. And what is it, the sunnah to recite in those first two rakahs? Surah Al-Kafiroon and Surah Al-Ikhlas. That a person begins his day before he goes out and meets the world. That what? I am not like those who disbelieve. I'm different. And at the end, in the witr prayer, if a person prays witr 3 raka'at, then it's legislated to recite Surah Al-A'la and Surah Al-Kafiroon and Surah Al-Ikhlas. And so at the end of the day, in the evening, at the end of the night, he reminds himself what? That I'm not like those who disbelieve. It's part of why I'm getting up and praying at night, because I have a different reality, something different that I'm working for. It's not just about making money and living. It's about preparing for the hereafter. And that's why I'm up praying right now. Surah Al-Ikhlas reminds us, or it informs us of who Allah is. And even though this surah is short, it's important not to underestimate its importance, and not to underestimate the importance of learning who Allah is, because that can have a huge impact. Because Surah Al-Ikhlas is not one of those big surahs, right? It's one of those go-to surahs when a person's rushing. But perhaps a person is rushing over what can actually benefit him. It's mentioned in the hadith collected in Sahih Muslim that Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had put together a military expedition, and that he put a person in charge, and that person, not only would he give the directives for the group, but he would also lead them in prayer. And he would always, whenever he would pray, he would recite Surah Al-Ikhlas. So when they came back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from their military expedition, they informed him that this leader of ours, he always would recite Surah Al-Ikhlas. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ask him why he does it. And so when they asked him, he said, لِأَنَّهُ صِفَةُ الرَّحْمَنِ وَأَنَا أُحِبُّ أَنْ أَقْرَأَ بِهَا. Because it's a description of Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. And we said that name Ar-Rahman indicates mercy and authority. That whenever you see Ar-Rahman used in the Quran, it's not just mercy, but it's also authority, because those two come together, hope and fear. He says, because it's a description of Ar-Rahman, and I love to recite it, the Prophet ﷺ said, inform him that Allah loves him. Allah loves him for reading and loving and reciting and understanding this short surah. So it shows us that we shouldn't belittle these short surahs of the Quran, and we should give them our attention. And so it's been narrated that from the reasons why this surah was revealed is because the Jews, and some say the Mushrikeen, asked the Prophet ﷺ, describe for us your Lord. And this was a description that the Prophet ﷺ was commanded to give. And that this surah is a third of the Quran, because a third of the main information of the Quran is to tell us about who Allah is. So he says, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allah is ahad, that he's unique. There's no one like Allah. Allahu samad, that Allah doesn't need anyone, but everything needs him. As-samad is the one that doesn't need anything, but everyone turns to for their needs. So know that Allah is unique. There's no one like him, and everyone depends on him. And this is the foundation for Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'in. Iyyaka na'budu, that we worship Allah alone. Why? Because there's no one like him. Wa Iyyaka nasta'in, because everything depends on Allah. So even if I tried to find someone else to help me or support me, I can't find it, because everyone needs Allah. Lam yalid wa lam yulad, he didn't give birth and he wasn't born of anything, meaning that there's nothing like him. There's nothing that resembles him. So he's so unique that nothing even resembles him. Wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad, and no one challenges him. He has no challengers at all whatsoever. He has none, and there shouldn't be any. And if we recognize that no one challenges Allah and his authority, then that means that there should be nothing that challenges our hearts for his place in it. That we be dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't let anyone or anything get in the way of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That just like no one challenges Allah in terms of the creation, no one determines who dies, who lives, rizq, sustenance, otherwise, birth, life, death, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That there should be no challengers to his authority in our hearts. And this is how his rububiyyah, his lordship, his qualities, his name and attributes leads us to worshiping him alone. Wallahu a'lam.